The basement of my grandma's house could only be opened after midnight. I was 11 years old the first time my grandmother warned me about the basement. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten me. She just looked directly into my eyes while the rain hit the kitchen windows and said, "Never open the basement door before midnight." That was it. No explanation. Then she quietly went back to washing the dishes like she hadn't just said the creepiest thing I'd ever heard in my life. Back then, I thought it was just another old person superstition. My grandmother lived alone in a massive wooden house at the edge of a dying town somewhere deep in the countryside. The place always smelled like dust, old books, and humidity. Every floorboard creaked. Every hallway felt colder than it should. And the basement door sat at the very end of the main corridor. Old, black, locked with 3 different locks. I hated that door. Not because of what was inside, because of how my grandmother acted around it. Every single night, right before midnight, she would stop whatever she was doing and disappear into the corridor, carrying the same old oil lamp. Then I'd hear the locks. Clack, clack, clack! After that, silence. Sometimes for 10 minutes. Sometimes for an hour. And when she came back, she always looked exhausted, like she'd just finished carrying something heavy. The weirdest part? She never allowed anyone near the basement after dark. Not neighbors. Not family. Not even me. Especially me. Whenever I asked what was down there, she always gave the exact same answer. Something that should never wake up. I remember laughing the first time she said it. I stopped laughing after the noises started. The first sound came 3 nights after I arrived for summer vacation. Knock! I opened my eyes immediately. Another knock echoed through the house. Knock! At first I thought it was coming from the front door. But then I realized something horrifying. The sound was coming from under the floor, directly beneath my bedroom. I sat up slowly in bed. The old digital clock beside me read 12:14 a.m. Then came the 3rd knock. Knock! Slow, heavy, deliberate, like someone knocking from the other side of a wall. My entire body froze. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself while staring at the bedroom floor. And then I heard my grandmother's voice somewhere down the hallway. Quiet, almost whispering. Go back to sleep. Another knock answered her. Knock! This time louder. I got out of bed before I could stop myself. Curiosity always was my biggest problem. The hallway outside my room was dark except for the weak yellow glow coming from the oil lamp downstairs. I moved slowly toward the staircase, trying not to make noise. Then I heard my grandmother speaking again. Except now. She sounded scared. You can't come out tonight. Silence. Then, knock! The house trembled slightly. I carefully leaned over the staircase railing, and what I saw nearly stopped my heart. My grandmother was standing in front of the basement door holding the lamp with shaking hands. The 3 locks were already open, and the basement door was slowly moving on its own. The basement door opened only a few inches, but the darkness behind it didn't look normal. It looked thick, heavy, like the shadows down there were alive somehow. My grandmother stood completely still in front of the doorway, holding the oil lamp so tightly. Her knuckles had turned white. Then the knocking came again. Knock. This time from much deeper below the stairs. Something was definitely down there. Something big. My grandmother swallowed hard. You need to wait. Her voice trembled. I had never seen my grandmother afraid before. Not once. And somehow that terrified me more than the basement itself. The air inside the house suddenly felt colder. The flame of the oil lamp flickered violently. Then, something moved in the darkness below. I couldn't see exactly what it was. Only movement. Fast, unnatural, like someone quickly stepping behind a wall. My grandmother immediately took 1 step back. Don't do this tonight. Silence answered her. Then came a sound I still remember perfectly even now. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Wet. Coming from somewhere far beneath the basement stairs. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run back to my room. But I couldn't move. I kept staring at the crack in the doorway, and then I saw fingers. Long, pale fingers slowly wrapping around the inside edge of the basement door. My heart nearly stopped. The fingers looked human, but too long, too thin, like the joints bent wrong. My grandmother whispered something under her breath I couldn't understand. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver key. Not one of the 3 lock keys. This one looked older. Stranger, covered in tiny symbols carved into the metal. The breathing below the stairs grew louder immediately. Knock. The entire door shook violently. I accidentally stepped backward upstairs. The floor creaked beneath my foot. My grandmother snapped her head toward me instantly, and the expression on her face, pure horror. "Go to your room." Her scream echoed through the house. At the exact same moment, the basement door flew open wider. The oil lamp flickered hard enough for me to finally see part of the staircase leading downward. The stairs looked impossibly long, far deeper than any basement should be. And somewhere down there, two pale eyes opened in the darkness. Watching us, my grandmother slammed the door shut immediately. Bang! The entire house shook. The knocking stopped. Silence filled the hallway again. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs while my grandmother quickly locked all 3 locks back into place with trembling hands. Clack! 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 Only after the final lock clicked did she finally breathe again. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she slowly looked up at me, and I noticed tears in her eyes. "Did it see you?" My throat felt dry. What is down there?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she grabbed the oil lamp and started walking toward the kitchen. I followed her quietly. She sat at the old wooden table without looking at me. Then she whispered something that changed my life forever. "That thing down there?" She paused. "That used to be your grandfather." I stared at my grandmother, waiting for her to laugh. To tell me it was a joke, but she didn't. Her hands kept shaking around the oil lamp while rain hammered against the kitchen windows. "That's not funny." She slowly looked up at me. "I'm not joking." A cold feeling spread through my chest. My grandfather had died before I was born. At least that's what everyone always told me. Heart attack. Old age, simple, normal. But nothing about my grandmother looked normal now. She looked terrified, exhausted, like someone who had spent years waiting for something horrible to happen. I sat across from her trying to process what she had said. "What do you mean it used to be him?" She stayed silent for several seconds, then finally spoke. "The thing in the basement still remembers parts of who he was." My stomach tightened immediately. "No," she nodded slowly. "Your grandfather opened something beneath this house many years ago." Lightning flashed outside. For a brief second, the entire kitchen lit up white, and I swear I saw movement under the floorboards. Then darkness returned. My grandmother continued speaking quietly. "There's a place under the basement stairs." Another pause. A place people were never meant to reach. The wind outside suddenly died completely. No rain, no insects, nothing. The silence felt wrong. Then came another sound from beneath the house. Something dragging slowly across wood. My grandmother closed her eyes immediately. "He's awake now." A chill ran down my spine. "What happened to Grandpa?" Her expression changed instantly. Not sadness, guilt. "He heard something calling him from below." The oil lamp flickered again. And for one horrible second, I thought I saw a tall shadow standing behind my grandmother in the kitchen doorway. But when I looked directly at it, nothing was there. My grandmother kept talking. At first, he only heard knocking. Knock! The sound exploded beneath the floor immediately after she said it. I nearly jumped out of my chair. The knock came directly under the kitchen this time, closer than before. My grandmother didn't react, almost like she expected it. He became obsessed with the basement. "Knock!" He stopped sleeping. "Knock!" He said something under the house was trying to speak to him. "Knock!" Each knock grew louder, more aggressive. Then the entire kitchen floor trembled slightly beneath our feet. My grandmother's breathing became uneven. He eventually opened the door before midnight. Silence, absolute silence. Even the house itself felt frozen. I stared at her, unable to speak. Then she whispered the sentence I still hear in my nightmares, and whatever came back upstairs. She slowly looked toward the hallway leading to the basement. "Wasn't your grandfather anymore." The kitchen suddenly felt freezing cold. I couldn't stop staring at the dark hallway leading toward the basement door. My grandmother slowly stood from the table and grabbed the oil lamp again. "He knows you're here now." My throat tightened. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward the hallway. I followed her carefully, trying to ignore the sound of my own heartbeat. The basement corridor looked darker than before, longer somehow. The old wallpaper, peeled from the walls in long, wet strips in the wooden floor, creaked beneath every step. Then I noticed something horrifying. Wet footprints, fresh, leading away from the basement door. My grandmother stopped immediately when she saw them. No. The footprints continued down the hallway toward the living room. Large, barefoot, human-shaped. But wrong. The toes were too long. My grandmother raised the oil lamp higher with trembling hands. And that's when we heard it. A voice. Very soft. Coming from the living room. Margaret! My grandmother froze. I had never heard anyone call her by her first name before. The voice came again. Margaret, please. The sound was weak. Broken. Almost crying. And even though I had never met my grandfather, something about the voice felt familiar. My grandmother's eyes filled with tears instantly. No. The voice answered immediately. Why did you lock me down there? The lamp shook violently in her hands now. Don't listen to him. Then the living room floor creaked. Slowly. Heavy footsteps moved somewhere in the dark. Thump, thump, thump. My body completely locked in fear. The footsteps stopped just beyond the hallway entrance. Out of sight. Waiting. Then the voice spoke again. Now deeper. Wrong somehow. You let me rot alone. A horrible smell suddenly filled the hallway. Wet dirt, mold, and something rotten underneath. My grandmother stepped backward, pulling me with her. We need to lock the basement again. Again? She looked at me with panic in her eyes. The locks don't hold forever. The footsteps suddenly started moving again. Faster this time. Thump, thump, thump. Something was coming toward us through the dark living room. My grandmother shoved me behind her. And then I finally saw it. A tall figure stepped into the weak yellow light of the oil lamp. At first, it almost looked human. Almost. It wore pieces of my grandfather's old clothes. But the body underneath looked twisted. Too thin, too tall. Its arms hung almost to its knees. And its face! I nearly screamed. Parts of it still looked human. But the skin hung loosely like it didn't fit correctly anymore. One eye looked normal. The other was completely black. And when it smiled, its mouth stretched much wider than a human mouth should. Hello, grandson. I couldn't breathe. The thing wearing my grandfather's face stood motionless at the end of the hallway, smiling at me. Its black eye never blinked. The other one moved slowly between me and my grandmother like it was studying us. My grandmother tightened her grip on my arm hard enough to hurt. Don't answer him. The creature tilted its head. A wet cracking sound came from its neck. Crack! You taught him the rules too early, Margaret. Its voice kept changing, sometimes sounding almost human, other times sounding deep and layered like multiple people speaking together. My grandmother slowly backed away toward the basement corridor, pulling me with her. The creature took one slow step forward. Thump. The entire floor trembled beneath its weight. Then it smiled wider. I missed this house. A cold wave ran through my body, because I realized something horrifying. The thing wasn't trying to escape anymore. It was comfortable upstairs. My grandmother suddenly whispered to me, "The silver key." I looked at her confused. "The key I showed you earlier. Give it to me." My hands shook as I reached into my pocket and pulled out the strange silver key. The creature immediately stopped moving. Its black eye locked onto the key. And for the first time, it looked nervous. My grandmother held out her hand. "Hurry." But before I could give it to her, the creature spoke again. "Ask her what she locked downstairs with me." Silence filled the hallway. My grandmother's face changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. "Don't listen to him." The creature laughed softly. A horrible wet sound. "You never told him the whole story, did you?" The lights inside the house flickered violently. Once, twice, 3 times, and then every door in the hallway slammed shut at the same time. Bang! I jumped in terror. The creature's smile slowly disappeared. What's beneath the basement isn't keeping me trapped. My grandmother whispered something under her breath I couldn't understand. The creature stepped closer again. Thump. It's keeping something else asleep. My stomach dropped immediately. The silver key suddenly felt freezing cold in my hand. Then I heard it. A sound coming from beneath the house. Not knocking. Breathing. Massive. Slow. Ancient. The floorboards vibrated beneath my feet with every breath. The creature closed its eyes for a moment like it was listening. Then it whispered, "He's waking up again." My grandmother suddenly grabbed my wrist. "We have to seal the basement before 3:33. "Why?" Her face went pale. "Because after that..." The creature opened its black eye again and finished the sentence for her. "The door stays open." My heart started pounding so hard it hurt. "The door stays open?" My grandmother ignored the question and pulled me toward the basement corridor. Hurry. The creature watched us silently from the hallway, still smiling, still perfectly calm. That terrified me more than if it had screamed. My grandmother reached the basement door and quickly inserted the silver key into a tiny hidden keyhole beneath the first lock. I hadn't even noticed it before. The moment the key turned, click. A deep metallic sound echoed somewhere far below the house, not inside the basement, much deeper than that. The creature's smile faded immediately. You shouldn't do that. My grandmother finally looked directly at it. You already took enough from this family. The creature tilted its head again. Crack! Did I? The hallway light suddenly died. Darkness swallowed the house instantly except for the weak flame of the oil lamp. And then, the breathing beneath the floor stopped. Complete silence filled the house. My grandmother froze. The creature's expression changed. For the first time since I saw it, it looked afraid. Then came the sound. Boom! The entire house shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Another boom followed immediately after, much louder. Something enormous moved beneath the basement. The creature stepped backward. No! Boom! The basement door trembled. The silver key started vibrating inside the lock. My grandmother whispered, He found the door. I stared at her in horror. Who found the door? She slowly looked at me with tears in her eyes. The thing your grandfather woke up. Another boom exploded beneath us. This time the basement stairs groaned loudly like the entire structure underneath the house was shifting. The creature suddenly lunged toward us. Fast. Far too fast. My grandmother shoved me sideways just before it reached the door. Its body slammed against the wall hard enough to crack the wood. Bang! The oil lamp fell from her hands and shattered across the floor. Darkness swallowed everything. I heard my grandmother scream. Then the creature screamed too, but not in anger. In pain, a deep growling sound rose from beneath the basement stairs. The floor began trembling constantly now. And somewhere inside the darkness below us, something gigantic started climbing upward. The growling beneath the basement stairs deepened until the entire house vibrated. Around us, I couldn't see anything in the darkness. Only here. My grandmother breathing hard beside me. Wood creaking beneath the floor. And something massive slowly moving below the basement. Then the creature screamed again. Not human. Not even close. Its voice sounded layered now, like dozens of people crying out at once. Lock the door. The panic in its voice froze my blood. My grandmother grabbed my arm in the dark. The matches. Kitchen drawer. Before I could move, boom! The basement door shook violently. A crack split through the wood. Something huge had struck it from the other side. The creature stumbled backward down the hallway. I barely saw its silhouette in the darkness. Tall, bent, wrong. Then lightning flashed outside the windows. And for 1 second, the entire corridor lit up white. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. The creature wasn't alone anymore. Figures stood behind it in the hallway. Thin shapes emerging slowly from the shadows. Some crawled across the walls. Some bent at impossible angles. Some looked almost human until the lightning disappeared. Then darkness returned. My grandmother whispered, Don't let them touch you. Another boom shook the house. This time the basement door bent inward slightly. The silver key vibrated violently inside the lock. And beneath all the noise, I heard whispers. Thousands of them, coming from under the floor. The voices overlapped each other so badly I couldn't understand most of the words, except one sentence repeating over and over again. Open the door. The creatures in the hallway slowly started moving toward us. The thing wearing my grandfather's face pointed toward the basement. You don't understand what she trapped down there. My grandmother shouted back immediately. I trapped you down there. The creature smiled again. No, Margaret. Another lightning flash filled the hallway, and this time I saw something horrifying behind the creature. A gigantic pale eye opening slowly in the darkness beneath the basement stairs, watching us. The creature whispered softly, He's looking at you now. The massive eye beneath the basement stairs didn't blink. It simply stared upward through the darkness, watching us. My entire body locked in fear. The eye was impossibly large, far too large to belong to anything that could fit beneath the house. And slowly, something beneath it smiled. Not a human smile. Something much worse. The creature wearing my grandfather's face immediately stepped aside from the basement door. almost respectfully. The shadow figures behind it lowered themselves toward the floor like animals obeying a master. My grandmother grabbed my wrist tightly. Don't look directly at it. Too late. The moment my eyes focused on the giant eye again, images exploded inside my head. Dark tunnels stretching forever underground. Ancient stone staircases descending into endless blackness. People kneeling in darkness, whispering prayers to something massive hidden below them. Then screaming. So much screaming. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. Blood dripped from my nose onto the wooden floor. The thing below the basement laughed. The sound shook the walls. My grandmother knelt beside me immediately. Listen to me. Her voice sounded distant now, almost underwater. You have to close the door before it fully wakes up. I forced myself to look away from the basement. The creature watched me carefully. And for the first time, it looked excited. You saw him, didn't you? The whispering under the floor grew louder. The walls of the hallway slowly started changing around us. The wallpaper peeled away, revealing wet black wood underneath. The ceiling stretched higher. The corridor itself seemed longer than before. The house was changing. Or maybe reality around the basement was breaking apart. Another boom echoed below us. The basement door bent outward violently this time. The lock strained loudly. Metal screamed. The creature smiled wider. He remembers you now. My grandmother suddenly stood and pointed toward the kitchen. There's an axe behind the stove. I stared at her in confusion. What? If the locks fail? Her voice shook. You destroy the door. The creature instantly stopped smiling. No. That single word came out deeper than before. Angrier. The shadow figures in the hallway began twitching violently. Bones cracking. Limbs bending. Bodies reshaping themselves in the dark. My grandmother stepped in front of me protectively. You're not opening that door again. The creature slowly tilted its head. Then it whispered something that made my blood turn cold. He already opened it from the other side. The hallway went completely silent. Even the whispers beneath the floor stopped. My grandmother stared at the creature in horror. No. The thing wearing my grandfather's face smiled slowly. And then the basement door began opening by itself.
Not outward.
Inward, as if something enormous on the other side was gently pulling it open. The silver key started spinning violently inside the hidden lock. The metal screamed. My grandmother grabbed me hard enough to hurt. Get the axe! I ran toward the kitchen while the house shook around me. The walls looked worse now. Wet black stains spread across the ceiling like veins. The wooden floor beneath my feet felt soft. Rotting. Another boom erupted below the basement, this time followed by a deep growl that didn't sound alive. It sounded ancient, like stone grinding against stone somewhere underground. I reached the kitchen and found the axe, hanging beside the old stove, exactly where my grandmother said it would be. The handle felt strangely warm in my hands. Behind me, I heard screaming. Not human screaming. The shadow creatures in the hallway had started tearing themselves apart, bones snapping, skin splitting, bodies twisting violently, like something inside them was trying to crawl out. I looked back toward the corridor and froze. The basement door was now halfway open. Darkness spilled from inside it like liquid smoke, but the staircase was gone. There were no stairs anymore, only an enormous black void stretching downward forever, and inside that void, thousands of tiny pale faces moved in the dark, watching, smiling. The creature stepped aside completely from the doorway, almost bowing toward whatever was below. He's coming. My grandmother turned toward me immediately. Now! I raised the axe with shaking hands. But before I could move, a voice came from the void. Deep, massive, impossible. Margaret. The entire house trembled violently. My grandmother froze instantly. The voice spoke again. You left me alone for so long. Tears filled my grandmother's eyes. And then I realized something horrifying. The voice sounded familiar. Not like my grandfather. Like something pretending to sound like him. The creature smiled wider. He learned all your voices. The darkness inside the basement suddenly moved. Something huge shifted far below. And slowly, very slowly, a gigantic hand began reaching upward from the void. The hand kept rising from the darkness beneath the basement. Gigantic, far too large to belong to anything human. Its fingers were long and uneven, covered in something that looked like wet black ash. Every movement it made caused the walls of the house to groan loudly around us. My grandmother stepped backward in terror. No. The creature wearing my grandfather's face looked almost joyful now. The shadow figures in the hallway dropped to their knees one by one as the enormous hand reached higher into the doorway. The air inside the house became heavy, hard to breathe. I tightened my grip on the axe, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Then the thing below the basement laughed again. The sound came from everywhere at once. From the walls, the floor, inside my head, and suddenly, the lights in the kitchen exploded. Glass rained across the floor. The old clock in the hallway began spinning backward violently. Tick, 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 faster and faster. My grandmother whispered something under her breath. A prayer, maybe? Then she looked directly at me. You have to destroy the doorway. The creature immediately screamed. Don't. Its voice shook the entire hallway. The giant hand suddenly stopped moving. And then, a second hand appeared from the darkness below, larger than the first. The walls began cracking open around the basement door. Black liquid poured from the ceiling. The house itself was collapsing. My grandmother grabbed my face with trembling hands. You listen to me carefully. Tears streamed down her cheeks. If that thing fully enters this house, morning will never come again. My stomach dropped. Another part of the giant figure began emerging from the void. Not a face. Something worse. Too many eyes opening in the darkness at once. Some human. Some animal. Some impossibly wrong. All staring directly at us. The creature wearing my grandfather's face stepped closer to me slowly. And suddenly, its expression changed. For one brief moment it looked human again. Really human. Terrified. Please, its voice cracked. Don't let him see you. Then its body twisted violently again. Bones snapped beneath the skin. The black eye widened, and the monster screamed in pain while collapsing to the floor. Something inside it was changing. Or escaping. The giant thing below the basement suddenly spoke again, this time using my grandfather's voice perfectly. Come downstairs. My legs almost moved on their own. The voice was perfect. Not similar. Not close. Perfect. Exactly how I imagined my grandfather would sound. Warm, calm, familiar. Come downstairs. The darkness inside the basement pulsed slowly like it was breathing. The giant hands kept pulling themselves higher into the doorway. Wood splintered around them. The walls of the hallway began bending inward unnaturally as if the entire house was being dragged toward the void below. My grandmother grabbed my arm immediately. Don't listen to it. But the voice continued. I've been alone for so long. The thing wearing my grandfather's face crawled across the floor now, screaming and twisting as its body cracked apart. Something black moved beneath its skin. Trying to get out. The shadow figures surrounding the hallway started pressing their heads against the walls repeatedly. Thud, 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 like they were worshipping whatever was beneath the house. Then the voice below spoke again. And this time, it used my mother's voice. My blood froze instantly. Please help me. I stared into the darkness without meaning to. And for a second I thought I saw people standing far below inside the void. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All reaching upward. Crying. Begging. Faces twisted in fear. Then they disappeared. My grandmother stepped in front of me. That thing learns people. The creature on the floor suddenly looked up at me with its one remaining human eye and whispered weakly, It eats them first. Silence filled the hallway immediately after those words. The giant hands stopped moving. The breathing beneath the basement deepened. Slow, ancient, massive. Then the entire void opened wider, like an enormous mouth stretching inside the darkness, and more eyes appeared. Thousands, blinking together, watching me. My nose started bleeding again. Pain exploded behind my eyes as whispers flooded my head. Open the door, let him through, he's waiting for you. I dropped to one knee, gripping the axe harder. My grandmother knelt beside me desperately. You have to destroy the doorway now. The creature wearing my grandfather's face suddenly screamed. He sees you. At that exact moment, every eye inside the basement opened fully. The moment the eyes opened fully, the house went silent. No breathing. No whispers. No movement. Just thousands of pale eyes staring upward from the void beneath the basement, watching me. I couldn't move. It felt like something inside my mind had frozen completely. Then the giant thing below the house smiled. I didn't see its full face. My brain couldn't process it correctly. Every time I tried to focus on it, the shape changed. Too many mouths, too many eyes, too many impossible forms shifting together in the darkness. Blood poured from my nose onto the floorboards. The creature wearing my grandfather's face crawled backward in terror. He's awake. The words barely came out of its mouth before black liquid started pouring from its eyes. Its body twisted violently, bones snapping beneath the skin. Something inside it was trying to tear its way out. My grandmother grabbed the axe from my hands and forced it back against my chest. Look at me. I finally pulled my eyes away from the basement. Instantly, the pressure inside my head weakened slightly. Tears streamed down her face. You have to break the doorway before sunrise. Another deep sound rose from beneath the house. Not a growl. A heartbeat. Thump. The floor shook violently. Thump. The walls cracked further open. Thump. The basement door bent outward another few inches. The giant hands had almost fully emerged now. And behind them, something enormous shifted inside the void. I finally understood the truth. The thing in the basement was far too large to fit inside the house. The basement wasn't containing it. It was only the opening, a tiny crack. And whatever lived beneath the world was trying to force itself through. The shadow figures in the hallway suddenly began screaming together, all of them pointing toward me.
He chose you.
The giant thing below laughed softly. The sound made every window in the house shatter at once. Glass exploded across the hallway. My grandmother screamed for me to run. But before I could move, the thing beneath the basement spoke directly into my mind. Not with words, with images. Dark oceans underground, cities buried beneath stone, massive creatures sleeping below the earth for thousands of years, waiting. And in every vision, people opened the door for them. I dropped the axe accidentally. The creature wearing my grandfather's face suddenly grabbed my ankle. Its remaining human eye stared directly into mine. And in my grandfather's real voice, it whispered, "Destroy the door before he learns your name." The moment my grandfather's voice said those words, the thing beneath the basement stopped moving. Every eye inside the void focused directly on me. The entire house trembled violently. And then, something smiled in the darkness. Not the creature wearing my grandfather's face. Something much larger, much deeper below. My grandmother grabbed the axe from the floor and shoved it back into my hands. Now, the giant hands beneath the basement doorway pulled themselves higher. The ceiling cracked open above us. Black liquid poured through the walls. The house was dying around us. I forced myself to stand despite the pain exploding inside my head. The whispers beneath the floor grew louder. Open the door, let him in, he's waiting. The creature wearing my grandfather's face crawled backward away from the basement in pure terror. It was scared too. That was the worst part. Whatever lived below the house terrified even the monsters trapped upstairs. I raised the axe with shaking hands. The giant thing below the basement suddenly spoke again, this time using my own voice. "Don't do this!" I froze instantly. The voice sounded exactly like me. Perfect. Then it laughed softly, and I realized something horrifying. It wasn't copying voices anymore. It was learning them. The giant hand suddenly slammed against the sides of the doorway. Boom. The walls exploded apart. For one impossible second, I saw part of the thing beneath the world. Not fully. Just enough. A massive shape moving beneath endless darkness. Thousands of eyes opening across flesh that constantly changed form. Mouths appearing and disappearing beneath layers of shadow. My brain immediately rejected what I was seeing. Pain ripped through my skull. Blood streamed from my nose and ears. My grandmother screamed, "Don't look at him!" I closed my eyes and swung the axe with everything I had. Crack! The blade buried itself deep into the basement doorway. The entire house screamed. Not metaphorically. The house itself screamed. Another swing. Crack! The doorway split further open. The giant thing beneath the basement roared so loudly the floor collapsed beneath us. The shadow creatures began tearing themselves apart while shrieking in panic. My grandfather's twisted body reached toward me desperately. One more. I lifted the axe again and brought it down with all my strength. The doorway shattered completely. For one terrifying second, everything stopped. Silence. Then the void beneath the basement collapsed inward violently. The giant hands were dragged backward into darkness. Thousands of eyes blinked rapidly before vanishing one by one. The roar beneath the house became distant. Further, further, further away. Until finally, nothing remained. The house collapsed around us. I don't remember getting outside. I only remember waking up in the rain hours later beside my grandmother. The sun was beginning to rise. The house was gone. Not destroyed. Gone, as if it had never existed. No basement. No ruins, nothing. Only wet grass and mud beneath the gray morning sky. My grandmother sat silently beside me, staring at the empty field. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. He'll try another door someday. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What was that thing? She looked at me with exhausted eyes and answered with the last sentence I ever expected to hear. We never gave it a name. She paused. Because names help it remember you. Then somewhere beneath the wet earth below us, very faintly, knock, knock.